Today on BRStv, we're going SPS crazy. Hey guys, my name is Ryan. Welcome to another week of the BRS 160, where every week we do our best to help you guys, members of the reefing community, enjoy your tanks and find new ways to explore the hobby. We do that by following the setup and progression of this 160-gallon reef tank. Last week we explored the world of large Polyp Stony or LPS corals. This week we're diving into SPS corals, starting with what makes them different than other corals, typical care standards like calcium and alkalinity consumption, flow, lighting, water quality, and nutritional requirements. We'll also use all these awesome examples of SPS that Austin Aqua Farm's unique corals and worldwide corals sent to us to explore some of the differences between the families of corals and discuss some placement options and growth patterns. By now it's probably pretty obvious that these are some of our go-to shops for a wide range of corals. We also have something a bit new this week with the addition of 30 or so SPS frags from battlecorals.com. This is a specialty shop that focuses solely on SPS aquaculture. I have to say I love Adam's site. It's visually stunning and closer to a coral art gallery than an e-commerce coral shop. Buying corals is absolutely a very visual experience, similar to shopping for art, and he nailed it. They also offer something I haven't seen anywhere else with the option of buying the coral grown out under halides, T5s, or LEDs, meaning you can get the coral which is grown out under the same type of light source as you're using at home. This is an awesome option and really kind of a thought-leading move for the industry. There are 100 different methods of maintaining an awesome reef tank. The best way means figuring out your goals like maximizing growth or best color representation for display. For most of us, it's probably a balance of these goals. So what is an SPS coral anyways? Remembering that SPS and LPS is just a hobby-based term, this is basically it. The difference between large and small polyp stony corals, or LPS and SPS, is just the polyp size. LPS corals like Euphyllia, Scolemia, and Duncans all have large, fleshy polyps. SPS corals have small, tiny polyps and generally considerably less fleshy tissue. How small is small? Well, whatever you happen to think is small. Remember that it's not a term used in the scientific community with agreed upon traits or characteristics. It's just a loosely thrown around term the reefing community has developed to help group the corals together in a usable fashion that doesn't require all of us to learn families, genus, and species. You can debate all day long if Hydnophora is an SPS or LPS coral. Many examples have fairly small polyps and some forms grow in a branching nature, similar to other corals we call SPS. However, some have what I would call medium or larger polyps. They lack the same coral-like structure that most SPS have, and they send out stingers, which is more of an LPS than SPS trait, so let the debate begin. End of the day, there's no need for debate because it's both and neither, because defining corals as SPS and LPS is like defining all dogs as LD large dog and SD small dog without any specifics as to what a small dog really is. Well, a Beagle, Pomeranian, Pug are all smaller, and grouping them together does have some value. They all have unique care standards and behavior traits. Same with LPS and SPS corals, so just skip the debate. It's impossible to be right or wrong. So in that general sense of the term, these are some of the care standards for corals commonly referred to as SPS, starting with calcium and alkalinity, flow, lighting, water quality, nutritional requirements, placement, and growth. In general, I think reefers make SPS tanks out to be a lot harder than they really are. As long as you understand the basics, I don't think an SPS tank is really that much more difficult than an LPS tank. There are just a few things that matter more, and an SPS tank is less tolerant of prolonged neglect. First component of SPS tanks is they consume calcium and alkalinity much faster than other types because they build their calcium carbonate-based skeleton much faster. So it's important to replace what they take out on a daily basis. In week 29, we shared all the science of how they use calcium and alkalinity, and while it's very helpful to understand how this all works and the effects on water chemistry, all you really need to know is SPS corals consume a lot of calcium and alkalinity, and you do need to replace it. As to which replacement method, Kalkwasser, 2-part, and calcium reactors all work well. Kalkwasser and an auto top-off being the easiest. You might outgrow Kalkwasser at some point, but it will likely be adequate for longer than you think. 2-part being the next easiest, more accurate and scalable to almost any size tank or demand. Calcium reactors being the coolest, doesn't impact salinity and also scalable, but costly and requires more maintenance, space, and monitoring. I'd say historically calcium reactors were the most commonly used calcium and alkalinity solution on an SPS tank, but 2-part is now probably more common by a pretty large factor because of the low initial cost and ease of adjustment. Kalkwasser is also making a resurgence in the community because of its ease and low cost. On the BRS 160, we're using two-part because that's what the BRStv viewers voted for, but it was a close vote, and a Kalkwasser calcium reactor hybrid was just a few votes shy of winning. Honestly, I wouldn't get too wrapped up in which one is best because they all worked fine on most tanks. We have in-depth videos on each one from week 30 to 32 if you want to learn more. On an SPS tank, you should also test for calcium and alkalinity more frequently. On the BRS 160, I test for alkalinity daily and calcium weekly. I use a Hanna DKH checker because I can get an alkalinity reading in about 60 seconds without the normal BS with test kits. After the tank is stabilized around the amount of livestock and our calcium and alkalinity solution matches the coral's consumption in the tank, I'll probably only test alkalinity 1 to 2 times a week, and calcium maybe only every other week. The reason we test for alkalinity frequently is just because there's less of it in the water, so it drops faster, and alkalinity impacts all sorts of elements of water chemistry. Since calcium and alkalinity are consumed together, it generally gives me a good pulse on the overall consumption of both. I also have a chart where I record it so I can see the effects of dosage changes, coral growth, or new addition of corals. This is a great practice regardless of where you are in the hobby. All in all, managing calcium and alkalinity is the main hurdle with SPS corals, and while it may seem intimidating in the beginning, if you take the time to figure out what you're doing and why, it's super easy to replace and manage. Really, anyone can do it. Next big difference about SPS tanks is flow. SPS tanks enjoy really high flow, like 50 times tank size turnover, so a 120-gallon tank could easily have 2 3,000-gallon-per-hour power heads or 4 1,500-gallon power heads. Many SPS dominant tanks will be even higher. They also like varied flow, which can be cool DC power heads like Tunes, Vortex, the Gyre, or Neptune's wave pump, all of which would slowly ramp up and down and do all kinds of varied flow patterns. Or it can be as simple as a couple low-cost Hydors, Tunes Nanos, or those ultra-low-profile CJ Extremes on an on-off style wave maker, or even just a couple timers with one pump set to be on for 8 hours, the other for 8 hours, and then both for 8 hours, which is a 24-hour-a-day cycle. Really anything that varies the flow up. SPS corals don't appreciate being blasted all day, every day in the exact same way. They'll show it with tissue loss or really strange growth patterns. The BRS 160 has 4 Tunes 6095s, which is 10,000 gallons an hour and over 60 times the tank size. Since they're varied flow, my guess is they range between 25 and 45 times tank size as they slowly ramp up and down in various ways. In terms of lighting, everyone will agree that SPS corals require more light than other corals, but after that, there's a lot of room for debate. Really depends on the species of the coral and where it came from and your goals for the tank. There are a couple approaches, one based on technical knowledge of the sun and PAR levels in the ocean, which often sends us chasing pretty high levels, and one more based on practical knowledge, where reefers have seen the most success with the artificial lighting sources we have available to us. Given the two options, I'm just going to skip the debate and share why we believe a PAR range of 2 to 300 to be the sweet spot of what we consider to be high PAR, and why we commonly refer to over 300 as very high PAR, based on what I'd refer to as practical knowledge and common experiences within the hobby with common equipment. To do that, we used a Giesman Spectra T5 halide hybrid fixture with a 250-watt single-ended 14.5K Giesman Megachrome bulb, 2 ATI Blue Plus bulbs, and 2 ATI Coral Plus bulbs. Pretty much every experienced reefer will likely agree that this light is capable of producing a pretty epic SPS tank where lighting isn't a major limiting factor. While it might not be the highest PAR option out there, it's representative of the standard home installs where there's a balance between attractive spectrum and PAR. We tested the PAR in this 30-inch cube using the Lecor PAR meter at 2 depths, 6 and 12 inches from the surface. At 6 inches deep, right under the bulb, you're seeing PAR in the upper 400s, which might be why you commonly hear reefers recommending 4 to 500 PAR for SPS tanks. But 6 inches to the left or right or front or back of the bulb, you're seeing numbers in the 2 to 300s. However, 12 inches deep, which is the center of the tank, we're seeing a huge swath from the low to high 200s. So outside of the hot spots, directly into the bulbs, most of the top half of the tank, we're going to see low 200s to low 300s, and what the BRS team is going to call the sweet spot. It's pretty critical that when we're talking about the correct PAR for SPS, we don't get hung up on the peak PAR right under the bulbs, but more so the entire range of the tank we're attempting to keep the SPS corals in. There are a ton of successful reefers who use higher wattage or PAR bulbs, HQI bulbs with more focused reflectors, or use multiple halides fairly close together, which can get the PAR range significantly higher. Most of them are what I'd refer to as pretty experienced reefers who are skilled at acclimating corals to high-intensity light sources. Even within that base, most will readily share they have SPS corals growing at 300 par and 600 par, both thriving, colorful, and growing almost indistinguishably. Okay, so how does this apply to the LEDs which everyone is using today? Well, common light sources like the Radion can reach peak par ranges in the 700s, which gives you the opportunity to emulate some of the brightest tanks out there if you want, but you likely want to start significantly lower and use their acclimation mode. To be honest, if you're going to buy some of the best lighting options out there with all the adjustments they offer, it just makes a lot of sense to buy a par meter as well, so you have the option of operating them intelligently with goals. On the BRS-160, we're using 2 Kessel AP700s and 4 ATI T5 bulbs with 2 Blue Plus and 2 True Actinic. The most commonly referred to attribute of the Kessels is their natural shimmer, which is very hard to achieve with LEDs. But with the AP700, I think the best attribute is the even spread and ultra-wide angle these lenses provide. At 100%, the Kessel T5 hybrid mix produces par levels over 600. We're going to tune the Kessels down to about 30% to begin with, which will put us in the 200 to 300 range almost everywhere in the tank, and then work our way up if needed. The nice thing about this AP700 T5 hybrid solution is you can tune it so there's only about 100 or so difference between the top 6 inches and the bottom almost anywhere in the tank. The light is very diffused and even, which is going to result in natural growth patterns and healthier corals. Water quality is another one of the important factors to SPS tanks. They simply don't tolerate lazy owners with heavy feeding hands as well as LPS or softy tanks, which means you either need to keep up on your water changes, keep less fish, or look at carbon dosing methods that will maintain ultra low nutrients. Maintaining water quality starts with your source water. You might be able to get away with treated tap water in many LPS or softy tanks, but with SPS tanks you should almost certainly be running an RODI system. Because the lights are also so bright, you're likely to run into algae issues if you don't keep the nutrients in check. We're obviously using RODI water on this system, but we also run a zeovit reactor, which is basically a carbon dosing system and a media that absorbs ammonia before it can turn into nitrates. On this display, I just don't want to ever run into an algae issue, and I want to maintain pristine water as close to natural seawater the SPS corals commonly come from. The last bit on SPS is coral nutrition. I think this is a bit up in the air because I've seen endless SPS tanks that don't add a single thing other than calcium, alkalinity, and fish food, so there's no room in my mind for anyone to say that you need to feed SPS or dose 15 trace elements to be successful. On the other hand, there are a lot of reefers who swear by the benefits associated with many trace elements or types of nutritional foods like amino acids. My best advice is use the ones with very specific claimed benefits, and if they provide the results you're looking for, continue to use them. We're dosing various KZ products to this tank, including Coral Vitalizer, B-Balance, Potassium Iodide Fluoride, LPS Aminos, and some Reef Chili. Some of that is because we're running a mixed tank. This is my personal first Zeo tank, but the community that relies on the system produces some pretty awesome tanks. You'll get to follow along with us and decide for yourself if the results are worth it. So that's about it. Fairly intense lighting, really high flow, good water quality, and a solid calcium and alkalinity solution. This really isn't that hard. That said, you may notice that many of the most awesome SPS tanks are not mixed tanks. They're SPS only tanks, and that's mostly because the unique requirements that are associated with SPS tanks may not be ideal for other types of corals like LPS and softies. That doesn't mean that you can't have an awesome mixed tank. It just means that producing an environment where all of these coral types thrive can be more challenging than an SPS only tank. It can be hard to get the par right for each type of coral when some love super high par and others just want 50. Even more so if you're evaluating par with your eyes as a measuring tool. So when many reefers think of a mixed tank as a step on the way to a full SPS tank, the complexity and learning curve might be the opposite, with an awesome mixed tank taking a lot more thought than an SPS only tank. One last note before we move on to the corals themselves. Even though we all debate the best way in all these elements, I think it's important to remember that best is really dependent on your goals. Our goal is to help everyone find a spot where they're almost sure to maintain a successful reef tank rather than push the boundaries on what's possible for a specific goal. Just to give you an example where the goals might be a bit different and so will the equipment, I asked Adam over at Battle Corals what his systems and maintenance habits look like. His goals are almost completely based around growth and long-term health of the mother colonies. End of the day, he sticks to the old fundamentals, lots of light, lots of flow, and overall system stability, meaning really high par, full spectrum lights with 250 watt 6500K Iwasaki halides. ATI fixtures running primarily 6500 Giesmann Tropics and LEDs with lots of warm whites. Most reefers would never use these yellow lights in a display, but they work awesome for his grow-out system. Calcium reactors for calcium and alkalinity, and testing alkalinity daily. No exception. His direct quote on flow: I have tremendous amounts of flow throughout my prop system, and I mean serious water movement in all areas and as much as possible, relying on multiple gyres, tunes, vortex, and some others. Water quality to Adam obviously means starting with RODI, running an awesome skimmer and a fairly large monthly water change, but doesn't bother with trying to achieve ultra low nutrients and doesn't dose any trace elements or foods other than what he feeds the fish. Really does sound like the basics, and there's no question is producing results for his goals. On to the corals themselves. The lion's share of the Sps corals fall into two families, Bacilloporidae and Acroporidae. Bacilloporidae with three main genuses or variants being Bacillopora, Stylophora, and Acropora, commonly referred to as bird's nest. Bacillopora is most commonly a branching coral with blade-like or thicker lobe-like branches, notably fuzzy polyps, and if you look very closely, warty-like growths on their skeleton. The most common color variation is pink, often a brilliant pink, which makes them stunning, but they can be found in blue, green, as well as multicolors. That said, like every coral we're going to discuss, the color, growth pattern, and other traits are going to vary wildly depending on your tank, the environment like flow, lighting, nutrient availability, and water quality. For instance, in the wild, the fuzzy polyps are most commonly retracted, but in the reef tank almost always exposed. So while we can make educated guesses, you never really know how any of the SPS corals we're going to cover today will grow in your tank. A couple other notable differences about Bacillopora is they can send out sweepers, but they're normally pretty short and around an inch. They're also one of the few corals which can commonly reproduce themselves in the tank, meaning not just grow, but you may find new colonies which have settled out in other areas of the tank, which is pretty cool. This is an example of a pink Bacillopora in Jason's tank. Easy to see why they're such a popular coral. Stylophora are pretty similar corals to Bacillopora. Most common difference is smaller, more stubby arms, and why it's often referred to as a cat's paw, available in the same common colors of pink, green, purple, blue, and close variants. Worldwide Coral sent us a really neat example of a green Stylophora, so we could share one with you. The Acropora genus is a bit unique in that it grows a network of frequently very thin, pointed, intertwined arms with a skeletal network similar to a bird's nest, hence the common name of bird's nest. There are thicker arm variants, but one of the most notable indicators you're looking at a bird's nest is a network of arms grow into each other and fuse with those nearby. Unique Coral sent over an Ora Polyp bird's nest, which is pretty popular in the industry, and Worldwide sent over a purple polyp and an Ora neon bird's nest. Pretty easy to see why they're so popular. Within the Acropora family, there are endless species which are very hard to identify by trained marine biologists and most often requires close examination of the skeletal structure under a microscope. In the aquarium, identifying the species is compounded by the fact that they grow very differently in captivity than they do in the wild. The most common genus are Acropora Montipora, and while some reefers might take a stab at identifying this species, most are more commonly referred to as the growth type, such as branching, table, bottle brush, finger, or other shapes. There are some types which are easier to take a guess at, like Millipora, which often have longer, stringy polyps, but even here, the guesses at species are more used as a descriptor of polyp shape than a true species identification. Most recognizable differences between Acropora and Montipora is more commonly found in plating and encrusting types, which are the more rare types of Acropora. The branching types of Montipora are generally smoother, more velvety, and have a rounded tip. We did our best to group these small frags into the various growth patterns, but it's pretty hard with corals this small, so feel free to call us out if we missed a few, starting with the plating Montiporas, a grafted Monticap from WWC, a green Monticap from Austin Aquafarms, and another grafted Monticap from Unique Corals. With the branching Monties, we have a red digitata from Worldwide, Ora setosa from Unique Corals, as well as an Elkhorn Monty from Unique. Starting off the encrusting Monties, we have a pretty awesome Battleberry from Battle Corals, WWC Mystic Sunset and Rainbow Montipora from Worldwide, as well as 5 cool examples from Unique Corals with a Superman Monty, Ora Mind Trick, UC Jedi Mind Trick, Season's Greetings, and Unique's version of the Mystic Sunset, all of which are awesome. Another form of Montipora is a columnar, or ridge growth, which has vertical columns or blades. A really good example of that is the tub stellata from Battle Corals. Acropora is absolutely the most popular SPS coral in the hobby and comes in an amazing array of forms, and we have a ton of examples today, starting with the branching Acroporas, which have tree-like branches and range from thin to very thick. Get ready, there are quite a few. First one being the Pearly Cadaver from Battle Corals, the June Ruby from Battle, Bungle Man, PC Rainbow, Paletti Yellowtip, and Goldilocks, all from BC. Worldwide sent over a bunch of branching acros with the Mike Paletta Pink Tip, WWC Grizzly Adams, and the WWC Green Mile. Unique Corals provided a Wild Acro Frag, Coral Pro Rainbow, Wild Orchid, a Yellow-Green Acro, and a Blue-Green Staghorn. To be honest, I'm not sure what's more amazing at this point, the corals themselves or the seemingly endless list of names everyone can come up with. The next type of Acropora is what I refer to as bushy, with a small to larger cluster of branches at varying angles. Adam and Battle Corals didn't disappoint with the Sky Parade, Coleman's Delicate, Three Seasons, Thurman's Secret Purple, the BC Sea Cal, Spain Bow, Thurman's Rainbow, Reef Ready Grape Juice, and Nilbog Resident. What a list of names. Austin Aquafarms provided a nice neon green wild Aussie Acropora, and Unique sent us these awesome bushy acro examples with the Cotton Candy, Bally SS, Wild Aussie, Purple Acro, and a cool light purple. Surrounding the corner into the table acros, these are typically either fused or more loosely arranged branches spread out in a table arrangement, sometimes with smaller upright branchlets. Worldwide sent us a couple awesome examples with the ATL Christmas Mirabilis and the Heartbreaker Acro. And then, believe it or not, 10 tabling examples from Battle Corals with, of course, the Ultimate Table, Fire Polyp Fire Table, Flamethrower Table, Ultimate Soli, Leprechaun's Beard, Pink Lemonade, Shades of Fall, Marmalade, Efflo 2.0, and last but not least, Brad's Insane de Fuego. Next up, cluster corals. These can range from compact clusters of short, thick branchlets to similar to a table but longer upright branches. Austin Aqua sent us a really nice example of an Aussie Purple and a Blue Millipora. Unique provided a Blue Ice, a Tenuous, a Blue Vermiculata, a Peach Millie, another Blue Vermiculata, an Ultra Millie, UC Superman Millie, and another Ultra Millie. Battle Corals wanted us to let you see a Blue Moon Humilis, Dale's Purple Unknown, Sunny X Sunset, Raindrops and Roses Millie, and Dante's Prostrata. Last coral we're going to cover today is the Bottle Brush Acro. This one normally has one main branch with short side branchlets, starting with Unique Corals Ore, Echinata, and Red Dragon, followed by Battle Corals Miyagi Tort and Bennett Yellow Tort. Hopefully you got a pretty good idea of the different shapes and colors SPS corals come in, as well as a good idea how to properly maintain an SPS tank. I need to give a special thanks to both RT and Nick, who helped me quite a bit in taking care of all the livestock and putting the Softy LPS and SPS episodes together, as well as our editor Dave, who worked into the night to get these released on time. Also, these livestock episodes wouldn't have been the same without Austin Aquafarms, Unique Corals, Worldwide Corals, and now Battle Corals, so a big thanks to all of them. Go check out all of their sites. This is the first week we've featured Battle Corals, so if you haven't checked them out yet, do yourself a favor and do so. You'll probably spend hours flipping through those beauties. Last week we asked all of you what your favorite LPS coral is, and Euphyllia's won by a pretty big margin. This week we're asking, what's the craziest coral name from this week's episode? If you have an even crazier one, share it in the comments area down below. If you got some value from this video, let us know with a quick thumbs up and subscribe to see next week's episode, week 38, Mounting Corals.